live, but in the chat, comment your favorite dad joke. Dad jokes are basically jokes that father puns. Or you can comment your fun fact. Today during our team meeting, I gave the fun fact that koalas sleep 23 hours in a day. So yeah, with that, I'll hand it over to Maggie.
Awesome. Thank you, Grace. Thank you. So welcome. Today we're going to talk about our panel. We have a lovely panel, and we're also going to talk about allyship. So thank you. We're so glad you're here. A couple of things before I introduce myself. So welcome to Design Buddies. If this is your first time, welcome. If this is your second, third, fourth, recurring, also welcome. We always love just being surrounded by different buddies. So a little bit about us, we are here to connect and support different types of designers from all types of backgrounds, right? We have mentorship, events, portfolio reviews, and so many other things happening in our community. We are 27,000 strong, right? We're gonna keep growing globally. So there's probably somebody else like you in our community, and we hope you keep inviting more people. And then we've also hosted over 50 events in the course of a year, and it's gonna keep going, right? And this includes panels such as this one, and also talks with industry leaders. So make sure to check out our socials and join us. Couple of house rules. This event is being recorded, so by attending, you are granting consent. Consent is important. Please, please, please do engage via the chat. We love chatter. We love you being engaged. We are trying to keep all of our promotional links, so all of your socials, all that. There is a networking sheet that will be going around, so please make sure to connect with everybody there and also make sure that your stuff is in there. Um, we do have a Slido, so towards the end, we'll try to grab one or two questions, depending on the voting. So submit your questions over there. We will take selfies, so stay tuned for that. If you want to use our Zoom backgrounds, make sure to grab it from the tiny URL. Make sure to share takeaways, right? We love takeaways. We love to tag people. Make sure you connect with each other. Make sure to continue the conversation in Discord. And most important of all, make sure to, be respectful of one another and have fun, right? We will be super conscious and aware of the chat and just ourselves today. And remember, this is probably a sensitive topic, or we may be touching certain things that may be a little bit sensitive. So from the get-go, I'm gonna say, trigger warning to certain things, but just make sure if you want to leave, if something makes you uncomfortable, let us know, or you can always choose to leave, right? You're here by your own volition. And of course, it goes without saying, happy Hispanic Heritage Month to my peeps. Keep celebrating, keep having fun. And with that said, I'll go ahead and officially kick this off. I am Maggie. I will be your host. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm a UX designer at HubSpot. I've been doing UX design for about 5 years now. And as you can see, I'm somebody who's heavily involved as design buddies. If we never met, make sure to connect with me. And if we have, hello. And I'll let our lovely panel introduce themselves. Alister, take it away.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm Alister. I use pronouns he, him. I am an Asian gay cis male. Today I'm wearing a white t-shirt with fries on it and under a black and yellow plaid shirt. Behind me is a virtual background of my living room. I am currently in San Francisco and on the land of Ramaytush. So I am an experienced designer at EA, specifically on the Sims 4 team. Sims players, yeah. I've been in the game space for around 10 years now. So if you love games, come talk to me. Yeah. So I'll pass it to Linda.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm Linda. My pronouns are she, her. I am an Iowa-based UI designer working at a company called Workiva, working with a lot of financial tech or technology and kind of working in those spaces. I am super in love with coffee, corgis, graphic design, illustration, all the things. So if you want to nerd out about any of that, hit me up. And I'll pass it on to Zach.
Thanks, Linda. Hey, everyone. My name is Zack. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a masculine presenting white male with, I would say occasional, but that's probably untrue, but with lots of feminine tendencies. Today, I'm wearing a camouflage hat, baseball cap. I'm wearing a red plaid flannel with a black t-shirt underneath and black framed glasses. Behind me is my apartment, which is bathed in bright pink neon lights. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coast Salish nations, otherwise known as Vancouver, where I am an experienced designer at Electronic Arts. Being in the gaming industry is relatively new for me. I've been there about 2 years, but prior to that, I was working at startups, did a brief stint in advertising, but have always kind of been in the tech industry, where I mostly worked in hybrid roles as a front-end developer, but also very close to design in that sense as well. So big karaoke fan, big gamer, big horror fan. So if you're into any of those things, yeah, feel free to reach out and connect. Always happy to chat. I'm also a mentor on ADP lists. So if you're ever looking for mentorship, feel free to find me there too. I can't remember if I was supposed to pass it off to somebody. So
You're all good. You're all good. Thank you. Thank you. That was really lovely. And actually, I think this is a perfect opportunity as well. You know, let's level set. You know, let's tell our audience why design, why product, why UX. Maybe give us a little bit of hint as to why you're here today, right? I think one of the reasons, if I can kick it off, one of the reasons that I was attracted to tech, it was I've always been into computers and whatnot. I knew I didn't want to be an engineer, but there was something about the digital side that always attracted me. I was a nerd, always been, still am, and it just felt like a natural path to me, especially with design. I was always a creative. I play with Legos. I drew as a kid, and I was always attracted to the very uh, creative aspects of problem solving. And I've never looked back, right? I did my master's in human computer interaction. I have a background in industrial design, so it just felt like a natural path to just be where I am today.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. For me, I think it really goes back to when I was a kid. Playing Game Boy in like at night in my parents' car, trying to get that perfect light at nighttime, just like me playing Pokemon. That's like still my favorite all-time game. And that nostalgia factor really, made me be really inspired to be, have a career in games. Back when I was in school, there wasn't a UX degree or anything experience or product design really, and it was mainly just graphic design. And I did the whole parent expectation of you should only be an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer. So I from expectation and family pressure, I guess, started my college life being a computer science major, and I really hated it. And through that, I actually had the courage to really explore design on the side, and then met one of my really good friends back then in college. She also exact same thing, family pressure. And there was one night specifically that made us become graphic design majors. Was we were both in the computer lab coding something for like parallel systems. It was like something ridiculous. Had no idea it was 4 a.m. and we were just singing Rent, like songs from Rent. And we're just like, we need to change careers, or, because this is not right. So from that day, we still talk about that very day, because if it wasn't for that day, we wouldn't have been graphic designers. So from there, I knew I really wanted to be in games, really into entertainment industry. I had the privilege to intern at Pixar and a lot of other, Viz Media, if you're anime fans. Very lucky. to do that. And now I'm at EA designing for Sims 4. So little history about myself.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had a pretty similar background to Maggie, where I really related to and really engaged with video games and computer programs as a kid, and watching my brother play them as I grew up, and then starting to play them myself. I just really just got into that kind of digital space, and was intrigued by how design could be something that could solve people's problems and not just necessarily market things or sell things, although that's such a really cool part of design too. But I was obsessed with drawing and other creative aspects as a kid, and always looked up to people like concept artists and those kinds of creatives that help build products and build things that people love to just get into and explore. And so I gravitated towards studying graphic design in college, and was able to explore a lot of different kind of fields as part of design. And it wasn't until I kind of stumbled upon UX as a concept, as a project within graphic design, that I realized that that could be a career path for me. So I really dug into that, really enjoyed how user interfaces could be a delightful thing for people, even if they're doing something that's not so delightful, like their typical day-to-day work. And so that led me to doing an internship at the company I'm with now. So pretty early on in my career, but really excited about all the opportunities of digging into design systems and creating interfaces that are really delightful and help people really accomplish their tasks with joy and things like that. So
for me, I kind of started, I guess, like back in high school. My school, I went to I grew up in a small town, and I went to like the arts high school. So they had a like design program. It was like maybe late 90s, and so they had like a computer design thing. So I took that, and I think I really fell in love with it really early on. But I kind of, after high school, I went into visual merchandising, which is still a very creative field, but less focused on technology, right? I mean, I think in some regards that there's technology there, but it was more of like a very hands-on industry. And I think I found I wasn't quite happy there. I was kind of missing that kind of technology interaction. And so I ended up pivoting back into tech. So I went back to school for, I think the course was called Web Design and Development at this time. This was maybe in like early 2000s. And that course kind of talked about design and also like web development, so front end dev. So that really got me into the online space. And then at some point, I kind of worked as like a hybrid for a little while. And at some point, I wanted to make a decision to say either I'm going to be design or I'm going to do dev. So I moved into dev, and so that's when I was kind of moving into the dev space for a little while. But engineering, I think for me was it's still very creative, but it was very like just not the level of creativity that I needed. I think there's only so much you can do from the engineering standpoint. And so I think for me, I really wanted to move back into that design focus. And UX and design just felt very, very natural. Like my therapist once described me as a compulsive caregiver. So I'm just like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So UX, really, really felt natural for that, where you're, I'm helping people do what they need to do, and solving problems and making their experience in their lives better. So I think that's what really resonated for me.
It always fascinates me how, even though a lot of people come from different backgrounds, like we all kind of come together and kind of like a similar, or come to a similar conclusion, and that's why we're here. So I always love hearing about these stories. But enough softballs, panel lists. No, I think that's good, but let's get into it, right? Let's talk about the important things and why we're here. You know, let's go ahead and I'm gonna ask this question. Does your current workplace have any diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives? And was that a deciding factor when you joined your company? And why or why not? Who wants to be the first?
I feel like Alister and I have the same answer for this question, which is yes, we do. I don't know if you feel like speaking to it, Alister. I mean, I'm already talking, but
You go ahead.
okay.
I realize we're also wearing the same kind of similar outfit too.
Totally. Yeah, so we have several ERGs at EA, and so one of them is focused on LGBTQ plus folk. So that's a big thing that we have going on, which is it's a really great internal group. They put on events. They bring in a lot of thanks, Maggie, for explain what an ERG is. They put on a lot of events. They bring in like speakers. They do a lot of really great things within the org. In terms of if that was a deciding factor, I had no idea that even existed when I had joined. And I think the first day at the office, I remember walking into like the big campus here in Vancouver, and there was like a big screen, like a big video screen, and it was like, I think it was like this big thing for Pride that was on it, or for the ERG. I can't remember exactly what, but it was one of those things where I walked in and I was like, oh, that's lovely. Like it was really nice to see that. So yeah, I mean, Alister, feel free to jump in and speak more about the ERG stuff, but yeah, that was kind of my experience.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, it's something about walking into a workspace and seeing a community where you actually feel like you can belong and not having to find that experience, right? And it's so empowering almost to find people to have similar upbringing or experiences, right? And even I keep saying the workplace, but it's like for me personally, before EA, I always felt like I couldn't be my authentic self, like I couldn't come out or all these things. But I think one of the big things for me joining EA was that they were very upfront about being diverse and inclusive. And even the CEO, Andrew, he's just very outspoken about it. And there's just something about having the CEO so outspoken about it, and then having the, people you interview with talking about the same things, and it's just like throughout EA culture. And it's like so great you just feel kind of like a warm hug in a way where you're like, okay, I don't have to do this whole work life thing by myself. And it's just great. And I think it's also a great space for allies, because I think a lot of these things, not everyone have the same lived experience. Everyone has their own perception of their world and their life. And that's one thing that opened my mind was, there are a lot of allies that actually are part of these ERGs and they don't personally identify with, let's say, we have an Asian one called Aspire, and there are not people who identify as Asians that also attend these ERGs, and they're just there, especially with the Asian hate stuff going on, just like allies coming in and be like, what can I do to help, or just educating themselves. It's always a safe space. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I love what you said, Alister, about being able to walk into a workplace and feel like you're open to be your authentic self. And it's like that kind of warm hug, that kind of a psychological hug almost of,
yeah,
it's okay to be your true self and come out. And I think my experience is really similar of, the limited work experience I had before Workiva was definitely one of not feeling like I could be my authentic self, and I didn't feel comfortable at all with coming out. And then when I came to the Workiva and saw just the kind of diverse workforce, and then also those employee resource groups that kind of are there to support different, identities and different kinds of people with different lived experiences, I felt comfortable talking to my coworkers about it and coming out and, talking about how that has affected my lived experience and how that affects the way I, approach design. So I think for me, it's an important part of what I look for now when I'm thinking about, job prospects. But I think beforehand, I didn't even know that that was a thing that could be offered because of that kind of poor experience I had before this. So I think it's kind of cool to hear that that's, something that other people kind of relate to, and hopefully it's going to be more of a norm and more of a, guess, table stakes kind of thing, I guess.
I 100% can relate to that. Like for me, it was what are we talking about here? What does that mean for me? And it a few jobs later down the road, it took me a second. I was like, I understand the importance of this to me, and I started looking for it. I started looking for jobs that really did have some initiatives, or really publicly spoke about these things, and that it just made sense to me. It really aligned with what I was looking for, and it got to the point that it's like, wow, yeah, I can reach that level of authenticity. And I like the analogy of the warm hug. I think that that was very important. So in the beginning, I'll admit it didn't play a role, but now it really does. And even if it is not necessarily an established ERG or anything of that sort, even just recognizing who's interviewing you, who's part of your team, who's at the top, who are at these different levels, just even talking about those things, I'm hyper aware of those things now, as opposed to before earlier in my career. So kind of interesting how things kind of change. So I think we talked about authenticity, which is an interesting one, and I'm kind of curious to, from the panelists, when what do you define as being authentic? Have you ever felt the need to maybe code switch, or you weren't able to be your authentic self? And did you do anything about it, or what was the consequence of that?
Yeah, I think one of the things about being my authentic self that matters a lot to me is my, kind of expression of my, fashion and the way I present myself and the way I speak. And so, currently I feel much more comfortable being my authentic self, but I do find myself in situations, if I'm in certain meetings with higher ups or in different kind of groups that are maybe like not designer focused, I feel a little bit more guarded, and I feel like I have to kind of present a bit more traditionally professional. I like to wear very, fun, colorful things, and I feel that that is, typically associated with childishness and not typical professionalism, and that, what I'm saying, regardless of what it's founded on or what experience I'm bringing to the table, might not be taken as seriously, and then, might be kind of misconstrued and taken against what I'm trying to bring to the table. But so I think that's kind of one way in which I've kind of defined my authenticity. But I'd love to hear, Zack or Alister, any of your experiences there.
Yeah, I hate to be like the like jaded one, but like I'm always really cautious about hearing companies talking about bringing authentic self, and I always challenge a bit, like I don't know if a lot of companies know what that actually means for a lot of people. I think they like it as a concept. It's like, yes, we want everyone to bring your authentic self, but it's like, I don't think, I think of certain situations where it's like, is it like, staff parties, for example, right? Does, being your authentic self mean that poly folks can bring their partners, like multiple partners, to a staff event? Forcing, people who have multiple partners to choose one person to come, that's not allowing someone to be their authentic self. So I really always challenge that. And so, yeah, I try not to be negative about that stuff, but I'm always just still a little guarded sometimes. For me, I think, Linda, what you said really resonates. I find that historically, I've always brought what I consider to be my authentic self, which is sassy gay man, like kind of jokey and kind of laughs a lot and brings a lot of positivity. But I've developed, and this is probably my own insecurities, I've developed a lot of insecurities around that in professional environments, especially, if I have goals of moving into leadership, or I have goals of becoming more senior, then, I don't see other people at that level that are that same kind of person that I identify with. So I've felt like I've had to kind of scale a lot of that back as well, right? And to your point, like that, it's that whole traditionally professional idea, right? So that's been a bit weird for me, and that's something that I'm trying out, being a little bit less sassy and funny and jokey at work, which has been fine. It's one of those things where I actually find it's been healthy maybe for me to separate that part of who I am from the work that I do. But yeah, like I think Maggie also talked a little bit about code switching in that question. And I think like, yeah, like code switching happens like I think every day, all day. Like it's just constant for me and probably for many other folks as well. Where I don't think the people at work are ever going to get the full authentic Zack that I would give my friends, right? And that's just something that sucks. But it's like I don't know. It's I don't know if there's much I can do about it right now. But.
I totally resonate with everything Zack said. Like it's definitely hard to not be your authentic self at work, right? Because it's exactly what Zack said. You don't see someone like yourself in leadership, and you don't know how you should be behaving. I always it's funny because I have a really good friend, and I'm always pretty stereotypically gay, I guess, whatever it is, the sassy gay person, and I always tend to roll my eyes a lot, like for fun, right? That's just like a thing. And there's a point where I got feedback for being too emotional. And it's just like one of those things where you're like, okay, that's HR violation first off. But secondly, it was just like in passing, right? It's like, oh, are you talking about like, am I expressing my gayness too much, right? And it hits a lot of levels in that spot. So it's like those are the things when once you get burned, you kind of retract, right? And I think we've all learned to do that. We become like turtles, right? And we'll come out when we feel like it's safe. And it hurts that I think code switching is like a positive and negative thing, because I think I do that all the time with like I have a bunch of like dance friends that I act a certain way, and then I have my like my gay best friends, and we yas and occur all the time, right? And those are like the things that how we bond and how we communicate, right? But in a work situation, it's like we are always taught exactly what Linda and Zack were saying, like the professional, how you're supposed to behave, and like you have to, even me, I'm like, because I've been practicing like exactly the same as Zack, like trying to move into leadership. I'm trying to count how many times I say I'm trying to count, all these things that I'm like, make sure you don't do these things. And it's like you get to a point where you're trying to be this person that feels very far from who you really are. And it's like, how do we connect these things, right? I think that's something I'm still working towards. And I would love to hear if anyone has any advice there. But yeah.
It's funny. I've definitely been in that position that something was said in passing and was used against me, and it took me the longest time to get over it. And that really, I feel like I always talk about that. I feel like that hindered a little bit of me being able to really be my authentic self and putting up a lot of guards around me. Especially not being represented, right? You don't see yourself. It's really hard. It's like, how much can I push? I really do like what you said, Zach, of pushing those boundaries and challenging some of those notions. I really am trying to do that myself as well, even as I gain more confidence in my skills and who I am and how I want to present myself in certain situations as well. So it's been definitely interesting, but I definitely resonate with a lot of what all of you said. It's really hard. I don't think code switching is a bad thing. I think it's a very natural, uh, almost instinct way to go about your life. I think we kind of all have groups and different scenarios that we kind of just. I wouldn't say we have different personas, but that that's the only like word that comes to mind. but I don't see that as a bad thing. It's more like context matters, I would say. So let's go back into, you know, in your experience and talking into all of this, what have been some of the best ways that you can like build psychological safety at work, or what has helped in the past for you to feel safe and get that warm hug?
I I don't know, that like that's a tough question to answer for myself, but I think that the easiest way for me is just working with other queer people, like having other like people on my team that like get it. Like that to me is really, really important. And I think that's probably the most safe I can feel. Because I think until you have somebody that's around you that gets it and that has a, you know, not necessarily the same experience, but like similar kind of experiences, then like I don't personally, I probably wouldn't ever feel that safe, right? There's always that risk of somebody that, you know, is going to, you know, be counter to the person that we are, right? The people that we are. So to me, that's the best way for me, is to feel safe in those situations, is knowing that there's other people there that are going through it as well. So
Yeah, to add to that, I think finding allies as well. I've been in a lot of panels about, you know, DEI initiatives, and I think maybe Zack was in one of them. I think maybe you were the one who brought it up about being the person in between, like just being there for the person who might be struggling, or you know, going through a microaggression, you know, something like that. And I think the having an ally being there for you is important, and understanding, maybe they don't understand why, you know, you're feeling this certain way yet, but at least they're there to listen, and not react to what's happening, and just be there to listen to you. I think that's one great thing. I actually have a list I created. I actually was thinking about this question a lot. It actually made me think about safe space versus brave space. I thought that was like an interesting thought about, you know, when we do create safe space, you know, everyone's comfortable, everyone's able to trust each other. But a brave space, it empowers people to, you know, understand each other's perspectives. It gives empowerment to people to, almost like encouragement to talk about what is not the status quo. And it could be, you know, a life experience. It could be something that's happening at work. And I think that whole idea it's so great. I'm not a huge expert on that yet, but I'm reading about it. And the third one that I'm going to talk about is educate yourself, right? I think a lot of it is, I'm still pretty new to this, to all this, you know, D&I initiatives. I have a good friend, Gino. I talk to him about this all the time because he's doing it as well. And it's just like, these are my thoughts. What do you think, right? It's a lot of it is just like a learning experience. And I think a big thing is also lead by example in a way, because you have to, it's not just your psychological safety, it's also everyone else's. And when you start having that empathy for yourself, you can start applying it to other people. And when someone else is going through something, even though maybe they're not going through it, it's nice to ask if they're okay. And I think that is very important. And if you can do that for others, you know, they could kind of pay it forward and do it for other people as well.
Yeah, I love what you said about, you know, fostering that psychological safety for others as well, and kind of leading by example, and then doing that by finding both allies and, you know, people that you can kind of have that kind of camaraderie with. I think one way that you can kind of, you know, try to establish that kind of psychological safety for other people, in addition to being that ally that speaks up when microaggressions happen, you know, during meetings, and reaching out to people and saying, hey, that wasn't cool. Are you okay? Do you want to talk about anything? Like, I think that's a huge part. But one thing that we've kind of been trying to do too is kind of set up a dedicated space, that kind of brave space almost, for people to acknowledge and talk about events that are affecting people, based on their identity, or what any sort of things that we don't traditionally talk about in the workplace, which I think was really spurred last year, in June, with George Floyd's death, and people actually coming to terms with and understanding these things affect huge swaths of employees, and we can't just pretend like things are okay. So having that kind of space that's dedicated and established, and where you kind of start it with that agreement to have shared values in being inclusive and working towards making sure that your team culture is inclusive and psychologically safe, is huge. And it's so much easier said than done. Like, that's so much easier when you have buy-in and leadership that's also kind of backing your cause. But if you can get to that point and kind of work towards that, I think that's a really great way to kind of build a psychologically safe culture.
Yeah, I think y'all nailed it. I love the brave space aspect of it. It's we're human first, right? We come into work and we're human first. And allowing for those conversations, even those moments, however small they are, I think that plays a huge role, in my opinion, as well. Not so long ago, we literally, instead of a very softball icebreaker, we took a deep dive into, okay, we're gonna talk about the things that we're happy about, and we're also gonna share where our current anxiety, what our current anxieties are. And we got real. We got really real. And I was like taken back by the fact, wow, this is happening. But it helps us identify, intersectionalities, the where we resonate with each other, right? We talk so much about empathy in our work, and we really need to put that into who we work with as well, right? It's not only about our users, it's about going meta and our teammates, you know. We work with them day in, day out, and that comes into play when it comes to talk about, like, I'm not feeling it today. And sometimes it's like, okay, you want to take a minute to talk about it, and sometimes you allow for that. And that helps things move along from what I've seen. Instead of just that person's gonna be worried about something, or talk about it. Allow for that time.
Yeah, I think especially now in the remote work situation, I feel like we have to, it's in a way easier to just Slack them or send them a message, right? It takes no effort, it does, because I think the worst thing you can get from an "Are you okay?" question is, "Oh, I'm fine. Why? What's wrong?" Right? Like, there's at least you tried, I think, because I think that action kind of builds your empathy brain in a way. And I think as UX designers, you're right, Maggie, like, we are always taught to show empathy for our players, but it's like we also need to show empathy for our coworkers and ourselves, even my dog, right? So empathy is key.
Yeah, it's very important. And I agree. It's so easy to just go in your day, especially with a lot of us being remote, right? It's just so easy. It happens. So easy to go about your day and be siloed and not really think about what's going on around you, or how are others being affected by, going about their day, especially that we're remote. There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of stuff happening. Um, there's a constant, like, on the news, like, what's next? What's the next thing that's gonna happen? So, yeah. All right. Um, what are some other things that if you can think of any that help you feel like you're being heard. You know, what are some things that maybe you're currently doing or practicing with your team that has helped with that communication? Because I think we're getting to the part of, you know, communicating as humans is important.
I'll go. I've recently am developing this DEI workshop on Miro, and it's an interesting concept. I actually adapted it from something I've read online about a general DEI, I think knowledge share. It's almost what do you call it? Analysis, I guess, in a way to really deep dive into what each letter means. And I converted that into a much more XD focus. And I personally think, you know, especially in games and at EA specifically, that I feel like us designers, we have the social responsibility to design inclusivity, right, to all our players, because I feel like we have the say in what pop culture is, right? If you can see, like, in terms of, you know, for example, Sims 4, if we have, I forgot the number, but it's like 1 billion amounts of players, and if you're not thinking about how to include every one of them, you're not doing your job, right? And we do get this place of like, you know, you always get that question, always, does it make money, right? And you always have to be like, but our players will feel seen and included, right? So the workshop that I've been really pushing for is just giving a space, I think, and actually an hour scheduled space where designers can just come in, and there are like pre-written questions of like, what do you feel like, you know, Sims 4, for example, needs to fix, needs to include what features, right? It doesn't have to be just the game. It could also be the Sims 4 dev team. Like, do you feel safe? You know, do you feel like you have, do you feel comfortable to share your ideas publicly, right? Because I know specifically on the Sims 4, we do a lot of culture packs. Like, for example, we have, I think we recently came up with the Japanese expansion pack, and it's like, do people have, you know, people who have lived in Japan or identify as Japanese, do they feel comfortable speaking, you know, their perspective on the game? So it's like a space to talk about that.
I really love that idea of having kind of a dedicated space for people to kind of equally contribute to and have their voices heard. And it's awesome to hear that it's, you know, establishing that kind of brave and safe space in a way, and having that you know, shared understanding that this is a place where you can speak up, and, you know, trying to help people feel included in it, and really, you know, drive that inclusive part of the design process, because obviously you know, diversity and inclusion are very different things, and accessible games and inclusive games are also different things, and being able to get to both of those things is huge. So I just love hearing that that's a kind of workshop that you're developing. I'd be really interested too to see if there's anything that you could, you know, publish and reuse in other spaces, because that sounds awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say that really does sound super awesome, Alister. Like, I'd love to. I don't know if that's something you can share with me internally, but I'd love to see that. For me, I think you know, I think, Maggie, the original question was kind of about, you know, what does it take for you to feel heard, or what was it? I can't remember what the original.
Just like, how do you make sure that this place is inclusive and welcoming of opinions? How do you currently practice anything, or maybe thinking of including inclusive any sort of initiatives to get that going?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't know if I have anything specific that I can call out that's going on, but I know for me, a lot of it's about the action, right? Is like, if I came into a team and saw that people were actually, not just talking about this stuff, but doing stuff about like doing something like that to me is really important. And that to me is, I think, what matters most. Because, people can talk about this stuff until they're blue in the face, but it's like, if you're not actually doing anything about it, then that's a thing, right? And that action, oftentimes lands on the shoulders of the folks who are marginalized, right? So it's not just about the action, it's about who is doing the action, right? Like who is actually running the stuff, who is taking on that burden from the marginalized folks, and that to me is the big thing too, where it's like if I see, all all the queer people running queer initiatives and pushing forward D&I initiatives and all that kind of stuff, then I'm just like, no, like like it's great to have them as part of that and have their input and engaged and have those people engaged in that process, but like it's that action's got to be led and pushed forward by that burden's got to come off of other people. So.
Yeah, it's a big burden, right? And we've seen that happen a lot of times where who's trying to make the push is also the one who has to wear all of it on their back.
And we have to do it at every single new job we start. It's like, at least in my experience, it's like, I'm like, oh, this again. Okay, great.
And it's exhausting. It's exhausting. Yeah. It's like a constant battle, essentially. It's like always trying to find allies or always trying to do something. You're always pushing. You're gonna get burnt out eventually. All right. I'm curious. Has been all of you, has you been as a queer, has that played or influenced a role in your job or how you are as a creative? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think for me, being queer and kind of reading into the like really rich history of design and queer history has really inspired me to use design in subversive ways. Like reading about things like how activists subverted oppressive Nazi symbology for gay men during the AIDS crisis is just such an inspiring thing. And knowing that there's ways to kind of use divisive design and subvert it and use it to bring people together is just so inspiring. So that's just something I really strive towards, is being able to kind of bring people together under a similar kind of concept and using design to do that. And I think that's just awesome. And having that part of my identity be something that has helped me connect with other queer people has been awesome too, and has given me opportunities to work with other queer designers and create design content for things like URL Pride Fests, and being able to create kind of a shared visual language almost that everyone kind of takes delight in and kind of rallies around is just such a delightful thing for me. But
I think for me, I think when I was young, I always thought I was a mutant, right? From just like reading a lot of X-Men, but I always felt like I was some sort of superhero because I always felt like I was different, right? I think that was just a positive spin on feeling different, and I think from that it really like my perspective is always going to be different from anyone else, right? I think that it doesn't matter if you're queer or not. I think whatever you identify with, whatever you've been through in your life, I think that would always influence your work. I think, like for me personally, I'm originally from Canada, but in high school I was in Hong Kong, and then now I've been in the US, and just learning the design patterns is completely different, right? Like each country has its own design language even. And I think with all that, even location wise, your identity, all those kind of, builds up into who I am today. And I feel like even, in the next 10 years, my style and design will change, right? And it's just like, it's such a cool place to be. Design is such a cool place to be because it's always ever changing, and it can be political, right? As Linda was saying, it can be very satisfying. It could be a hobby for some people, right? And it's a great space to be in, to represent yourself. So
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you on this. It's, to me, yeah, it's like lived experience is what we bring, right? I think as queer people, like it can be very challenging, and very painful, but it's like, it can also be such a huge gift, right? Like it gives us such an interesting perspective on the world, right? Like that experience that we get from being queer people, we can bring that into how we approach problems, and we can bring that into how we can empathize with other people. Like we inherently have this struggle that we've gone through, and it's like being able to like bring that to our work is really like that is a huge quality that I'm so grateful to have. So yeah, I always bring that to my work. I kind of look at, I still have my biases, as everyone does, right? So that stuff is always tricky to kind of manage, but it's, that gives you kind of an advantage at kind of being able to tackle those, right? So yeah, I bring that stuff to my work all the time. Anytime I've got to use like imagery, I'm just like, let's find some queer shit to put in here. Like, like it's just like, you do that whenever you can. I have a friend of mine who works for the government. I won't say which one or where, but he does the same thing. Like anytime he's got to put photos of people on like the main, like he does like the main government website, he's always just like, yep, we're putting queer people in, or we're putting, these kind of people in. So it's about kind of, I love being able to use that and really kind of push that forward through our work.
it's funny. I do the same thing with my wireframes. Every time I need a name, I put like a famous, it could be a drag queen, it could be like Milk Harvey, it could be like anything that just like input something so people would know, because they'll be like, who is that? And they would learn. You just have to be creative, right?
Yeah, I do the same thing. I remember the last time I put a whole bunch of drag queen names in placeholder copy. Yeah, and everyone was like, where do you get these names? I was like, let me tell you.
Yeah, it's like the better version of lorem ipsum. It's just drag queen names. Yeah.
Exactly, like just little queer Easter eggs here and there.
Yeah, exactly.
I approve of this content. I can totally relate to this because I do it as well. Even with just being Hispanic, right? I make sure I throw in those long names that'll break your UI design. So maybe not in the queer aspect, but I make sure to, all aspects of me are somewhat represented through my design, some way, somehow. And I learn new ways all the time. I'm definitely doing the drag queen stuff now. Learning new ways to just keep incorporating myself into my designs so that others can benefit and learn. So I love that. All right. So one last probing question to end them all. What can people do if they want to be better allies in the workplace or even in their lives? What is some of those takeaways that you would leave behind for people to just go and do it?
I think it's a really tricky question. Like there's obviously so many ways you can approach it. There's no one right answer, but I think Alister brought up a really great point earlier about reaching out to people and showing them that you're empathetic towards their plights and not reacting, but listening and being there and giving them the kind of psychological and emotional space to feel safe and not feel pressured to talk about those things if they don't want to, but to know that you are there for them and that you're not there to solve or fix the problem necessarily, but you are there for just that kind of comfort, which again, always easier said than done in some ways, and there's no one right way to do that, but I think just being able to navigate those relationships and make sure that people know that you are an empathetic ear and not one to just react to things.
I think for me is I overheard a quote, something about like you need to design the dark patterns out of yourselves. I forgot who said that, but that was like really brilliant because you start to have to analyze your own biases and your own perspective of your life. And when you start that internal dialogue, you start seeing others more for some reason. And it's like, it's such a beautiful thing. And it's exactly what Linda is saying. It's just the whole being there for people when you need to. Like, it could be as easy as like when you're reading something on the news, you read something, tragic, and someone who might be struggling on that day, but they're still they're still clocking in, 9 to 5, doing their workday, and having, just a simple message, just so that person can know that someone is thinking about them. I think that's really important for an ally that can do. And kind of what we were talking about earlier of when you do witness microaggressions against people, you can be that person. Sometimes it's hard to, confront a person, right? But being maybe someone who doesn't identify as a minority could stand in for you and have that conversation for you, because sometimes it's really hard for that person to do all the work all the time.
Yeah, I just want to second what Alister said. Like when you see something in the news that affects somebody, like reach out to that person. Like that, I've had somebody do that to me, and it was like there was like this horrible situation happening in Toronto, in the village there, and it was like nobody at work said anything to me except for one person, and that made a huge difference. I was like, oh, thank you. You like are aware enough about this thing that's happening, and you understand how this affects me. And so, yeah, just reaching out when you see something in the news, and I say this with the knowledge that, like, everyone is different with that stuff. Not everyone is going to want you to reach out. A lot of folks they don't want to necessarily relive that trauma, at work. So it really depends on your relationship with that person. The other thing that I find really helpful for like to be a better ally, and again, like this is, it depends on who you are and how you do this, but I find volunteer work is really good to help and to understand, if you understand other people as well, right? Understand communities that you maybe don't have that knowledge of, right? You do have to be careful, because I think Linda mentioned this earlier. And maybe not, it might be, I have a terrible memory, so I might be forgetting, but you don't want to necessarily be that person that's coming into somebody else's community, like with this intent of like helping and saving, like, like there's that whole, especially with, white people, there's a big like white savior thing, right? And it's like, you have to be very cautious about coming into another community and doing that kind of thing. But I find that if it's appropriate, volunteering is a huge thing. You're giving back to communities that need the support, and you're kind of learning a lot more about that community by doing and by being a part of it. And so I find that really, for allyship, I think that's like a really good thing. But it does come with that big caveat of like, as long as it's appropriate, because sometimes it can be very inappropriate.
I really like what Flora said here. Give the marginalized voice, and Zach, you also talked about it. Rather than speaking for them, I think it's important to lift each other up. I kind of wrote my 3 points. I really thought about this for a little bit, and I wrote down: make sure you educate yourself, and if possible, it's okay to drop links and resources, but that shouldn't be the burden of everybody. That's really on you, your own growth, and willing to respect others and educate yourself. That's on you, and that's how you become better. Claim your mistakes and make room for growth. Right? Be humble. Understand that you are not the end all be all. We're always learning something new, and we should be curious about what that is. And be ready to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Conversations, these type of conversations are never easy, and that's good. Let's be uncomfortable for a little bit and see where that takes us, and hopefully we can grow better together.
I would say one last thing, question everything that you think, like question everything about your stuff, right? Like I find like every time I think a certain way about something, I'm like, wait, stop, Zach. Why do you think this? A big part of being an ally is doing that constantly, and getting into a good habit of doing that is really healthy. So yeah, sorry to kind of jump in there, but yeah, I think that's another thing. It's like calling your own bullshit and questioning why you feel a certain way, why you think a certain way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. It's like, well, why do I think this way, right? And sometimes it's our own bias experiences. Sometimes it's trauma. Sometimes it can come from anywhere. So it's good to That's why we talk about these things. Is like we're gonna question everything in our own minds, and we should be ready to unlearn and relearn, right? I love the commentary in the chat. Awesome. Well, I don't have anything else to ask. We're at the top of the hour. I really appreciate and love our panelists. I appreciate all of you for hanging out and sticking around. Love the conversation happening in the chat. So thank you all. Grace, I know you usually do photos, so I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, for sure. We're gonna do a group photo first and a wave for our Instagram story. So I'll let everyone give a few moments to turn on the camera if you wish. Don't worry if you don't want to. You can just keep your camera off or leave the meeting. I'm going to do gallery view so we can see everyone. But yeah, thank you all so much for coming. I definitely learned a lot. And I feel like questioning myself is something that I'm constantly doing, and learned a lot of like questioning myself, even if like, why do I feel like it's sus, or just like questioning myself like with everything I think of in life is definitely good. And also questioning other people and questioning everything that doesn't make sense to you, and speaking up and everything too. But yeah, we're gonna do a group photo, and I'm going to set up my Zoom so it's fine. Have gallery view open so I can see everyone. All right. And feel free to bring any object you want. I have this friendly Rillakkuma here. Oh, what kind of plushie is that, Alister? Oh yes,
Do you
I
play
think
Overwatch?
I don't.
Sombra.
Oh, I have the same lamp as Maggie.
Cute.
It's from our friends at Swine.
Love it.
Is that
yeah,
like
I'm
design
gonna,
buddies?
yeah, it changes colors too.
Cute.
Yeah, all right. I'm gonna do a couple and choose the one that everybody looks best in. You know how it's all like, right? So all right, ready, set, just keep smiling. I'm gonna choose a couple, so feel free to like change your pose or anything. I look at everyone's photos, make sure we're choosing the best one. So all right, we can do a wave for our Instagram story, so feel free to wave, dance, dab. I just got a lot of Slack messages, but anyways, opening Instagram story. All right, let me make sure it's all pulled up here. All right, ready, set, wave. Hello, buddies. We just had a wonderful panel with Alister, Zack, and Linda about LGBTQIA+ and Allyship. Thank you, buddies, for coming. Check out the recording on our YouTube channel. All right, this is kind of like what we do to like hype everyone up after our event. And with that, thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to stop streaming on YouTube. So bye, YouTube. Bye.